Honorable Dr. Eugene Mutimura, Minister of Education. Honorable Rosemary Mbabazi, Minister of Youth. Honorable Francis Gatare, Cabinet Minister, our keynote speaker. Dr. Donald Kaberuka, Professor Jeffrey Ujeje, Vice Chancellor, African Leadership University. Mr. Faustin Mbundu, Chairman of the Board of Directors of African Leadership University. Our esteemed dignitaries, guests, families, and friends. And most of all, members of the class, MBA class of 2019. Let me add my warm words of welcome to everyone to this wonderful day. And please join me in congratulating our class, the MBA class of 2019, for this wonderful achievement of today. I also would like to thank all those who have gone on this journey over the last 2 years with our MBA graduates. When I did my MBA at Stanford about 15 years ago, I was single, I did not have a job, and I didn't have any children. So I could focus on my program for 2 years. The ladies and gentlemen who are about to graduate here have all been doing this MBA, a very rigorous MBA program, with wives and husbands and children and jobs and so many responsibilities to juggle. And so I have huge admiration for them. And most importantly, for all of you, the families who have had patience with them over the 2 years while they have been going through this. So please, let's thank all the families and friends who have been supporting them. I'd also like to recognize and thank some of our special corporate partners. We have Tembi and M. Tamsin from Standard Bank, who have been on this journey with us as well, helping to ensure that we develop some great leaders for their organization. Now, here at the African Leadership University School of Business, we talk about developing leaders for the African century. Now, why do we talk about the African century? One of the things we believe is that if we look back to the last 1,000 years, the millennia that has just ended, the first 700 years was defined by what happened in Europe, North America, when the Renaissance period happened and lots of scientific innovations emerged and the Industrial Revolution happened and a lot of progress in the world was driven by what happened in those economies. And then when we look at 100 years ago, the last century, a lot of the progress that we saw in the world was defined by what happened in Asia. That's when we saw the rise of countries like Japan and Malaysia and Singapore, and more recently, China and India and so forth. And that really defined where the world went. Now, when we look at the century that we're in, the 21st century, we believe that the world will be defined by what happens in Africa. And this is because by the end of the century, 40% of the world's population will be African. And so where Africa goes is where the world will go. And even more interesting is that by 2035, which is less than 6,000 days from today, Africa will have the largest workforce in the world. 1 billion people who will be of working age on this continent, the largest, larger than China, larger than India. And so this is why we believe that this is going to be the African century. The only question is, will it be a good century or a bad century? And we believe that only by applying our greatest resource, which is not the gold and the diamonds and the oil that we have, but our minds and our people, will we ensure that this becomes a great century for the entire world. And so this is really the vision behind the African Leadership University, to develop 3 million leaders, entrepreneurs, innovators, who are going to apply their minds with passion and with ingenuity to address Africa's greatest challenges and capture its greatest opportunities. People who are going to make sure that every African in this century has good healthcare, good education, good infrastructure, good governance, and most importantly, jobs. One of the things that we talked about yesterday was that I spoke with this graduating class yesterday, and I reminded them of 3 things. The first thing that I said was that as they go through this journey, as they move on from the 2 years that they've been with us here, they're going to need perseverance because the job of leadership is hard. And so at the African Leadership University, when you go into any campus, you'll see the first thing you see are 3 words: do hard things. And that's a reminder that as they go out into the world, and especially given that they are privileged, very, very few people on this continent have had a chance to have primary school education, secondary school education, university education, let alone a graduate degree. As the 1% of the 1%, their job is not to solve small problems. The job is to solve our continent's biggest problems. And in doing that, they're going to face many challenges. They're going to have many ups and downs. What is going to take them through is perseverance. And so what I want to remind you again, class of 2019, as you go through the next 20, 30 years of your career, to support each other and to remember all the friends and family that got you through this, and most importantly, that went through this 20-month program with you. And also to remember that at ALU, you never really graduate. Today we're having a ceremony, but this is really the beginning of your relationship with us. We say that this is like Hotel California. You can enter, but you can never leave. And so we're looking forward to, Dr. Karuka just mentioned that it sounds like Brexit. And so we're going to be with you through these ups and downs, and we'll be constantly reminding you when you have those moments of doubt, this is what leadership is about. It's about doing those hard things and continuing even when you have obstacles that seem impossible. The second point I reminded them about yesterday when I spoke with them is that we talk about developing 3 million leaders for Africa, 3 million leaders who will ensure that the 1 billion people that will need jobs in less than 6,000 days from now will actually be employed and will have healthcare and education and all these things that we believe they need. Now, one exercise that I often do with our younger leaders, we have an undergraduate program in Mauritius and Rwanda, and we've also got some programs in Kenya. I talk to these young leaders and I say, if you divide the 1 billion jobs that will need to be created by the 3 million leaders that we're developing, that works out to be 300 jobs per leader. Simple math. Doesn't seem impossible. 3 million leaders, 300 jobs per leader. We can then ensure that the entire continent is employed. And that's the task that we have set for the 3 million leaders we're developing. But the group that is here are not undergraduates. They have 10 to 15 years of work experience. Some of them even have 20 years of work experience. They have been through undergraduate programs already. Some of them have other master's degrees. They work in the most prestigious organizations in Africa. They have brilliant minds. And so yesterday we did an exercise where I asked them to think about what their challenge is going to be. If the young leaders are doing 300 jobs, then what are they going to do? We have Clever Mugabe in the class, who's from Rwanda. He has already created 1,000 jobs. And so they did an exercise where they thought about what they would all, as a class, be able to do. And it was inspiring to see the numbers that they came up with. We had numbers ranging from 3,000 to 5,000. Those were the ones that were in the group with Clever. And then obviously some, had other numbers. But at the end of the day, the average that came out of this exercise was 1,300 jobs per leader. That's what they thought, that if the young people are doing 300 jobs per leader, then they're saying they're going to do 1,300 on average. So I want all of you in the room to witness this and hold them accountable over the next 6,000 days. Because what I said to them is that if we think about the fight that we're going to, we're entering into one of the greatest struggles that we have ever had as a continent in the next 6,000 days. And in that battle, they are the admirals and the generals that are going through. They're not the foot soldiers, they're not the infantrymen, they're the admirals and the generals. So they need to think big and to be able to have significant impact on the continent. The third thing I said is that the expectations are very high, and we're looking forward to you living up to them. But the good news is that here at the ALUSB, they have been prepared well for this task. Because one of the things we believe is that you learn leadership best through practice. It's not a theoretical exercise. While many of them complained and thought about how challenging this experience was over the last 2 years, it was exactly what you needed. Because there's a difference between what you want and what you need. And what you needed was a very rigorous, challenging experience over the last 2 years where you had to balance so many things. And to come through today, having survived, much stronger, and with the muscle to go out and do the much harder things that you're going to have to do. Because this last 20 months was child's play compared to what you're going to have to do over the next 6,000 days as we go out into this battle. So I want to congratulate you again and to really thank you for being our partners in this journey and in creating also a flagship institution for the continent as the second class, and also as co-founders really of this university. And to wish you well as you go out and serve our beloved continent and to bring peace and prosperity to Africa. Thank you.